Welcome to Keeper of the Mountain. I debated with myself for a very long time, long and hard, on how to make this video, and I still don't know if I got it right. But back in April of 2022, I was just forging ahead on working on my Boattail Speedster. I was making progress, doing a little bit every day. My little bits were turning into big things. And everything was working great. And I was really looking forward to the 4th of July, because on the 4th of July, something happens here in the mountains every year. Right after that holiday weekend, which of course it rains during that holiday weekend, the rain pretty much stops. And we just don't have any rain right up until October, November, somewhere in there. And then it just starts raining again. And it never stops until the following July. It's just this natural cycle of things here in the mountains. And the reason that I was waiting with such anticipation for that is because I have this tiny little shop. And a lot of my stuff has to happen outside. It's really important stuff. And I can't do it in the rain, or don't want to do it in the rain. I'm not going to go out there and try to film in the rain. It's just a pain. And I needed to get the rear end out from underneath that Cougar, that Mercury Cougar that I bought, so that I could get it in the garage and mount it underneath the car. I also had a bunch of other parts I needed to remove from the Cougar, and I wanted to just get it all done at once and get rid of the Hulk, because I just don't need that sitting in my front yard. It's just not nice to me or the neighbors. And, you know, that's just the kind of person I try to be. Not always successful, but I'm trying. But as many of you know, on April 26th, my father died. And my father was my superhero. He's the one who gave me this car. I just, really had a hard time with that when he died. And it took about 2 months for me to get through all the stuff around burying my dad, and to, the funeral and all the stuff we did. And finally on right after the 4th of July weekend, we buried my dad, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. But first, before I start back on the car, I've really got to get some siding put on the side of my house, because I've been remodeling my house, still am. It's just what it is. When you own a house, you remodel it. And it's an ongoing, never-ending project. And so I decided I'm going to spend a couple weekends on my siding, and then boom, back on the car, and we're going to get the engine in, and we're going to get the rear end pulled out of the Cougar. We're going to make some progress, and man, by the end of the year, I'm going to have the rear end in this thing, the drive shaft hooked up, the engine running. It'll be sweet. Well, while I was working on the siding, I blew out my knee. I tore up my meniscus, and I couldn't do ladders. I couldn't climb around and work on the car. It was miserable, and so I thought, I'll get this operated on as soon as I can. And I did. I got it operated on as soon as I possibly could. Not only did I have, to wait for the schedule for the surgery, but I also ended up with that horrible disease that nobody wants to talk about, that's been plaguing mankind for the last 3 years. And I ended up with that right when I was supposed to have the surgery. So I got booted down the road another couple of months, and until I could be fit in the schedule again. And so here I am at the end of December. This is the last day of December. And I'm finally recovered from my surgery, and I'm back to work on the car. But on the bright side, when I was going through all the pictures to make my dad's video, which you can look back on my channel and see that video that I did about my dad. It's the last one I posted. I found some pictures that didn't make it in that video that are making it in this video, that were of the Boattail Speedster at its beginnings, at its roots, where it came from, and it's really kind of cool. So why don't you check those pictures out, and I'll tell you what they all mean and everything. It'll be fun. So here we go. Now what we see here is my dad holding the lower right corner of that map in the picture. Art, or Sammy as he was known, worked with his Boy Scout troop to build that Ford TT into a camper. Then they toured Yellowstone National Park. That sparked a love of cars in my father that stuck with him all of his life. He spent a lot of his time working on cool cars and driving them, and always dreamed of building one of his own, done his way. He was always drawing drawings and inventing parts, and then one day, in the middle of the 1980s, he saw this. Now, he wasn't a big fan of how this guy built it, but there was no getting around the potential. Back then, most of the affordable kit cars were built on the VW Beetle platform, and that just didn't interest him. This one, however, was designed to use the VW Beetle or the Ford Pinto or the 5-liter Mustang II from the late 70s. So after crunching some numbers and moving things around, there was just no way this was not going to happen. Next thing you know, a semi-trailer showed up with the frame. After unloading it and seeing the price to ship the rest of it to Fontana, California from Florida, where my dad happened to be living, he discovered that they could go and get it for the same money as having it shipped. My father and my brother, who you've also seen on my channel, and I'll put a link to his channel down on in the description, they built a trailer from parts that they had laying around. And then they joined my mother and they went to Florida to get the parts. Upon returning to Fontana, there was this clapped out hulk of a 1978 Mustang II 5-liter that was at the neighbor's house, and my dad acquired it. Now, if you're a Mustang fanboy, I'm really sorry that you have to see this. Just keep in mind that the Mustang II is the ugly red-headed stepchild of the Mustang family. Well, except maybe the 4th generation Mustang, and then, yeah, that's one that we don't talk about. So yeah, never mind. For some odd reason, the scrap yards in California, at least at that time, would not take a car without an engine. So after picking it clean of every usable part, he broke out the torch and cut the poor thing into small enough pieces that it no longer was considered a car. It was just considered scrap metal. Circumstances changed though, and soon they moved to a ranch in eastern Washington state, out in the middle of the pine forest. Yet another brother of mine that also has a channel on YouTube, yeah, he does, that I will link a description to, yes I will, gave my dad an E350 1-ton Ford van with a 302 engine and a C4 transmission. The engine and transmission were in good working order, but the rest of the van was a rolling health hazard. It had been worked to death. My dad did not have the facilities to hoist the engine out of the van. Then again, not having the right stuff never stopped him before. He drug it out into the open, hooked a chain to it, and just using his old Dodge truck, just rolled it right on its side. That's something I wish I'd have gotten on video. But Dad got out his trusty cutting torch and turned the rusty parts into liquid parts until the engine came out of the truck. After a successful motorectomy, that is a word, isn't it? The chain went back on and the van was upright once again. I know, he did it all wrong. Where do you think I learned to do everything wrong? Don't shoot me, man. I'm just the messenger. Well, today's a little bit, and we're still trying to get this engine put in the frame. And it's time to put a second coat of paint on these parts. It's been 3 days since I painted them, and the weather's been absolutely miserable and cold. So let's see if it's even dried in 3 days. Well, this one seems to be dry. And this one seems to be dry. And this one seems to be dry. What about these over here? Now these are on the door, hanging on the door. Oh yeah, they're still sticky. Yeah, a little bit sticky. So yeah. So 3 days, it's still not dry. I guess that's April weather in our forest on our mountain, huh? All right, well, let's get another coat of paint on them. Well, finally I get to the point now where I can put the engine back in the frame so that I can start building the body, because after I put the engine in, I have to finish assembling it to put the carburetor and the exhaust manifolds on it, a valve cover gasket on it. That way I know where to place the body parts. I also need to mount the radiator. And gee, quite frankly, we're not too far from starting this engine. It won't be that long in the future and we'll be starting this engine. That'll be a fun video. But at any rate, this was a project in and of itself. I did not expect it to be this difficult with all this room to work around the engine. I worked on this and worked on this, trying to get this engine and transmission put together for like 2 days. And I just couldn't get them to get together. And what it turned out is, while I was cleaning this transmission, the input shaft had fallen out of the transmission, and I didn't have the input shaft all the way into the transmission. So where the torque converter was going in all the way on the input shaft wasn't all the way into the front pump. So by the end of the second day, I got everything where it belonged, and I got the transmission bolted up to the engine, and here I get it put in the frame. Now, as soon as that's bolted in there, I can start reassembling the engine, getting everything going, and man, we are getting just dangerously close to starting this motor for the first time. I am excited. So thank you for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. It really helps my channel. And if you like this kind of stuff, hang out, man, because hit the notification button because more is to come.